Hi, everyone. Welcome to Driving the Discussion, the Reality of Rare Disease. I'm Kimberly Heidman, one of the co-founders and EVP of Patient Experience at Scout Clinical. Our goal at Scout is to enhance the health of others, and we hope that this series of discussions and collaboration with individuals in the rare disease community will help bring a wider audience together and build a stronger voice for innovation and research. We really want to positively impact the clinical research experience for rare families. And so to that end, appropriately today, I'm joined by Pam Cusick, Senior Vice President at Rare Patient Voice. Pam, thanks so much for being with us today. We're excited to talk with you. Could you tell us a little bit about you, Rare Patient Voice, how you got involved in the rare community, and just kind of tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I have been involved in public health research and market research around patients primarily my entire career in a variety of different ways: clinical research, market research, the whole nine yards. But in terms of rare, I started with Rare Patient Voice about 7 years ago. It was started by my colleague Wes, he and I had worked together for quite a long time ago. And he realized when we were working together that there was a kind of a gap in research. How do you find rare patients? A lot of research organizations, it's easy to find people with diabetes. It's easy to find people with, asthma. But for rare conditions, it's not as easy to find them. So he set about, starting this company. And what we do is we go out to events. So we'll go out to the National Hemophilia Foundation Conference or National Sickle Cell Conference. We'll meet patients and their caregivers and invite them to join our community. And then when we have a request, be it a market research, focus group or survey, or a clinical research request, we'll invite them to participate in that. And it's up to them if they're interested and it works for them. They're welcome to join that study. So now, we have grown over 10 years. We have over 100,000 patients and caregivers across 1,400 conditions, and they are in 9 countries. So we, a couple years ago, branched out and started offering them opportunities to participate in clinical research. And that's been very interesting because it's vastly different than market research. There's still inclusion and exclusion criteria, but fewer and fewer people are able to participate, and the studies are much longer and harder to manage than an online focus group, let's say. But we find a lot of interest. Patients really want to be involved. They want to share their story. They want to help other patients not have to go through the same thing. They want to participate in clinical research because especially for rare, a lot of them are genetic conditions that, if something can be fixed now in their lifetime, maybe something doesn't happen to their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren. So patients really want to help and really want to be involved. And so that's kind of how I wound up in the rare space.
Thanks, Pam. That's great and really helpful. It's interesting to me. So you kind of shifted from reaching out to patients in market research, and now you said you've kind of opened up in the last few years. You've opened this up to clinical research participation. What would you say are some of the barriers or some of the issues that you've experienced making that change or that shift? Have there been changes in how you approach the patients, education? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So for us, it's a similar process. We're offering them an opportunity to participate in a study. We provide them all the information, whether it be an interview or a clinical trial, where that would be. If there is any, for market research, there's compensation. For clinical research, it's not quite the same thing. But we feel that, it's important to give them all of the details. So if it is something where they will have to be involved for several years or travel to a site every couple of weeks or stay there several days each time, we want to make sure we give them as much information as we can to provide to help them make an educated decision. Because, as you can imagine, there's not, it's often not just one person who's impacted. It's a parent, they have several children, and those children you have to do something, while you're away at the trial site, and making it easier for them. So we want to give them as much information as we can, so that when, they are clicking that button to move forward, they're doing it with, as much info as possible.
And would you say that the patients that you're talking to that are becoming involved in clinical research that are willing to do that, are you getting the sense that they are satisfied with the way the trials are designed, or how the sponsors are trying to meet them where they are? What is the feedback that you're getting from families? You mentioned, what we all know, which is it's not just the participant, it's not just the patient that is impacted by this. And often in the rare community, it is entire families, because we do have our pediatric patients, our adolescent patients, even our adult patients that still, they're requiring that whole care partner system, and it affects the whole family. What is the feedback you're getting from the patients and the caregivers in terms of that?
So I think, they're excited to participate. And as you know, not everyone, gets invited, so, or qualifies. So that's a bummer. But, I think they understand why that's the case. I know from some of the patients and families that we communicate with, that it can be hard, and it is not, they don't always get the support that they need. I've heard multiple stories about, wheelchairs that are broken in transit, and that's the only way for their child to get along or get around. And, or they're left at the airport and someone sent Uber for them, but it doesn't accept a wheelchair. And so there are a lot of pain points there. They are, still enthusiastic and want to participate because they want to make a difference. They want there to be a cure, a treatment, a something, for themselves or for their family member. So they still try to participate, but it isn't always easy.
Yeah, and do you think that there's a place for additional patient education or family education on what services might be available to them to help support them? We'd really like to give a space for families to be able to speak up and say, in order to participate, it would really be helpful for me to have X, or it would be helpful for me to have support in not just cost neutrality, because I think cost neutrality is where we tend to spend a lot of our focus. But is there a need for education around what's out there? And you specifically deal with a global patient population. So we're not talking about just patients in the United States, in North America. The needs may be different globally. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So I think it's, in terms of education, we did a study internally about where patients find out about trials, and how they learn about them. And most of them would prefer to learn about them from their primary care doctor. And that's challenging because, not, unless your doctor is at a treatment facility, or at an educational, institution, your doctor might not know about a trial. So a lot of the patients that we know, again, a lot of times it's a parent who is, a child who really needs, something. And those parents go to the ends of the earth to try to find, where is there a doctor who's interested in this? Where is there a trial? They might have to travel halfway across the world, but if could save their child's life, they'll do it. But in terms of education, if patients really prefer to learn from their own doctor, I think, that's one of the spots that would be good for, education, because a lot of doctors don't necessarily know about clinical trials, or they're not following them unless they're involved in the research themselves. And that's a big hole, because, if I have something that maybe, that my doctor's never seen before, there could be a trial, but that he's not really probably even, he or she isn't probably even looking for those things, because they might not even know what I have. So I think that's kind of a gap, in educating patients about where trials are and what they could be eligible for, because where they want to get the information is not really where it's usually available.
And that's one of the things that I understand at Rare Patient Voice. That's what you all are trying to overcome, is make sure that they know where they can go. And I've spoken to several people in the rare disease community that say these families are involved in clinical research because it's hope, right? It's you said they'll go to the ends of the earth to do whatever is necessary, and that benefits the whole patient population, even should that be a small patient population. It affects all of them and affects us in the future, because the research that's being done on those particular diseases could potentially impact other therapeutic areas, other diseases. So how are you all, what would you encourage families to do if you could say one thing to them to encourage them on how to reach out, how to learn more? Because, like you said, maybe even their doctors don't know, especially if it's a new diagnosis with very little detail. What's your recommendation to those families? How can you encourage them?
Well, being involved, being your own advocate, it's important to, even though, again, another study that we had, we found that, not all patients join advocacy groups. I thought that they did, but they don't all. About 50% of those that we reached out to and did the survey with said that they aren't part of an advocacy group, which surprised me, because advocacy groups are one way that you can learn about new treatments, new things coming on the market. Some of them are involved in legislative issues, and it is a good way to kind of find your people. A lot of even if it's a genetic mutation or something, you think that there are not that many people around, and maybe there are only 20 families, but that's 20 people that you can share your story with and get information, with. I think the one, thing that, or commonality, I think, in a lot of these parents is they just dive right in. Like, I got to find somebody who will work on this neuron, or I'm going to find somebody who's going to work on this mouse model, because eventually it's going to help my child. And, it's costly, and it's, they change, or they have to quit their jobs or whatever it is to make this happen, but it's their child's life. So I think the main thing is, you have to be your own advocate, because especially in a rare condition, most people don't know about it. They don't, it's what, 1 in 200,000 people or something like that is, that's a rare disease. Well, you might not ever meet anybody with your condition if you don't join a group, go online, go to some of the, there's Global Genes, go to Nord, go to these organizations that have, all of this information, and try to connect the dots. Because, I think people want to help, and your doctor does want to help, and all of that, but they don't, if they're only exposed to a certain amount of things, they may never have heard of your condition and not be able to help you to do that. I have one friend who, she was, sometimes you're diagnosed with something that, it's not what you really have. And she was diagnosed with, she ended up having esophageal cancer, but she was young and it didn't fit the profile of someone with that condition. And she was diagnosed with lupus and some other things, and but she knew that wasn't it. And so she went and did the research herself and found, through her networks and through her research, found somebody who would take her seriously. And sure enough, she had esophageal cancer, was able to get treated, and that, moved forward. But I think it's almost like you have to be a warrior. You have to be your own advocate, your own researcher. And then if you can find a band of people who have the same kind of situation, that's also very beneficial.
Yeah. And do you think that doctors are equipped enough with the information on advocacy groups to share that information with their patients so that they can give them that reference to encourage them at the doctor's office to say, this is what we think is going on, and here are some resources potentially for you? Do you think that doctors are well equipped with that information right now, or do we need to make some changes in that respect?
I don't know. I would guess that they don't necessarily provide that information. It's you're looking, at that short time slot that you have to speak with your doctor. You have, they're giving you, treatment, whatever it is they think your condition is. Go get these tests, send the nurse in, and kind of move forward. I don't know that they always have a resource network like that can where they can share who these advocacy groups are and what could help a patient. I really, I think it would be great if they did, but I feel like a lot of that is on the patient, on the family, or the caregiver to go out and do that on their own. Because I don't know that the doctors are, spending or have enough time to, pull that information together for a patient. I'm sure some do. I'm sure some do, but I don't know that they do on a regular basis. I think it would be really beneficial if they did,
Yeah.
because again, back to the study that I mentioned, if 50% of the people, they didn't even know there was an advocacy group,
Right.
they didn't know that there was one out there that they could connect with. That's a huge loss.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent call to action for groups like Scout, that we need to make it we need to make the community more aware that we're talking with you, that we're trying to learn from you, so that when we hear about these patient communities, we can start investing in them as well, and making sure that we're putting that information out there. Hey, there is this group for you to be a part of. Because one of the things that you said about being your own advocate, there's a lot of patients and a lot of families that they're just at a loss. They don't know how to do that. And so I think your group, Rare Patient Voice, you're giving a platform for that. And we need to give like you said, just shocking that there's so many patients that didn't even realize there was an advocacy group out there. Now, there's something else that you mentioned in one of our earlier conversations that I found really fascinating, and it was this N of one research kind of concept. Would you elaborate on that a little bit for everybody that's listening, and talk about just your insights there?
Sure. So, this is, kind of a popular thing in the rare community because there's so few people. You can't, if you're doing a trial, again, back to diabetes or asthma, you can have a lot of patients and do a lot, and not have as much a problem recruiting. But if you have a condition, or let's go back to a genetic mutation, it's something that, impacts 6 people or 12 people that are known in the whole world. The idea that any one of them would fit all the inclusion exclusion criteria, it's pretty hard to fathom. So there are cases where it's that N of one, where it's the, testing the treatment or the intervention on one patient with that condition, that mutation, to see if there's a change. And it's not, I don't think it's not followed that much, because the way that you want to set up a trial is to have a lot of patients and to have a good robust sample, but it's not possible in some of these rare conditions. So there are parents, again, I go back to them, who are fighting for, this N of one. There is a drug in whatever condition that, is working for these people who are similar to these people. Can we test this? And I think that again, you have to be very careful with those things and making sure that they're, the right person, and the risks are, mitigated to the best, of their ability. But if there is a chance that you could save that child's life, improve their quality of life, I think most parents, want to try that intervention because it could make a world of difference. Um, so there are probably hundreds of parents out there, thousands, who knows, who are trying to, get in front of somebody to say, look, this is what I learned, this is what I know. Can we do this thing? And then,
Yeah.
then there are all kinds of approvals and things that are done for that. But it is, in rare, it sometimes might be your only choice.
That's right. Yeah, thank you for that. Um, do you have anything that you'd like to say or any thoughts on how we can help motivate the community, the clinical research community, and what can we do as, as third party providers, patient services providers, advocacy groups? What can we do to help innovate in that area, to push that innovation forward, to motivate the community to continue to provide the research for this small population?
It's, a lot of stuff comes down to money, and then science and efficacy and risk, so you want to make sure that there's, you're not putting undue risk, or subjecting a child to something that, could make things worse. But I think the more of these, N of one studies that go through and we see some, improvements and changes in, again, saving life or quality of life, that there might, those sort of like success stories might help to encourage companies to move forward. I think it's this it's going to sound terrible, but there's a cost, right? There's a in
Yeah.
developing new drugs, and there's a whole, pipeline of things and decisions that are made way down the line. And, some decisions are made that, well, even if this does become, even if this does work and it costs X amount, will they get their money back out of that? Meaning
Right.
the pharma company. And I would say, but you saved a life. And so, and that to that, to that child, to that family, you did everything. And so it's the value is in what you provide. Maybe sometimes the value is not, in the money that you're going to make from that drug, because no, it's not going to be like Ozempic or, where
Right.
all these people can use it. It's
Yeah.
going to be something that's used by 20 people, but maybe it can be repurposed later. Maybe it can be something that, it helps people with, similar mutations and challenges. So,
Yeah.
even though I think some of the decisions are going to be financial, and I mean, you have to be realistic too.
Hmm.
I think that, deep down, the decisions, can you save someone's life? If you do this, will that child live? Will their quality of life be improved? And the decisions are, hopefully will be made around some of those things too.
Yeah. I think that's a difficult conversation that we all find ourselves in, which is the financial conversation, right? Like you said, a lot of times it comes down to money. And, I know advocacy groups and a lot of these different groups are raising money to support that, and really pursuing research and trying to make this something where they can get the sponsors' attention. They can push this research forward, but at the end of the day, it does cost money to do these things, and it's a difficult conversation to have because those of us in this industry, our desire is to impact healthcare, right? It's to impact the health of these people. And like you said, if we can save one child, if these wonderful researchers, the scientists behind all of this can save someone's child, that's what we all want. We
Mhm.
all just are bound by the financial burden, and we have to find the balance there. With that, I kind of want to change directions and ask you about something I've noticed on your social media. You guys have been talking a lot about some different conferences you've been to and interactions that you're having in the industry. And one of the topics that you guys have been talking about is DCTs.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested with the recent activity that you've had. I just want to get your perspective on the DCT model, thoughts on that. It's a big topic right now. I just participated in a webinar yesterday on this topic. So it's a fascinating topic and very timely and really important for us to discuss. So tell us your perspective.
So I think, for some rare patients, the traveling to and from a site is hard, and that, is sometimes the burden that they just it's too much for them and they can't do it. And so, having a trial that's closer to home, having someone come to your home to, do the blood work or whatever you can, whatever can be done at home or close to home is often, sounds great. And that they would like to take advantage of things like that. The other side of that, though, is, we've had one woman who I was working with. She said, being in a trial is hard enough, and I don't want to be at my home because what if something happens? And so there's a little bit of a, like the balance between, okay, if you can want to come and take, do my blood work and, take some other vitals and so on at my house because you're checking in on me, that's fine. But in terms of administering an intervention, sometimes a patient would rather be at a site because there's a whole crew of people who can help if there's something that goes wrong and they're not at your house. So there are some different feelings about it. I mean, some patients think, it would be great, though, some who have been in trials and some who haven't think, that it's very helpful to have decentralized trials and that it makes their lives easier. And indeed, if I don't have to travel with my child in a wheelchair across the country 4 times a year and figure out what to do with my children at home, that part is easier. But there's always that, what if there's an adverse, reaction, and where do I want to be? At a hospital or at a center or in my house. And so I think there's a little bit of mixed feelings, and I think, it's new enough to people that it's like a lot of new things sound great. And it sounds like, oh, that would be fantastic if you just came. It's kind of like telehealth, right? Telehealth is great until you've like had a sore throat for 6 weeks. You're like, I really need to go somewhere because I probably have strep throat. Sometimes it doesn't work. So I think there are mixed feelings about it, and it might be depending on the type of trial and depending on the patient and the severity of their own illness, would determine whether they would be willing to do something that was remote, decentralized versus being, on site with, a number of providers who could help you.
Yeah. I think you touched on something that's really important in terms of the mixed feelings and responses and how patients and their families feel about DCT. It seems like we've created kind of a box. This is what DCT is. And, one of the things that a lot of folks in the industry are talking about is clinical research is not a one size fits all kind of thing, right? And can we potentially look at DCT as a toolbox? And specifically, how can we look at trial design early on and thinking about the patient experience very early in the process so that we're taking the tools out of the appropriate toolboxes? I heard someone say, specifically like you're saying, we're not going to be doing biopsies at home. We're not saying that, but what we're saying is there might be a mixture of those tools that can work together. And so from our perspective at Scout, we very much see that because we are involved with DCTs. We're involved in the traditional site model, and we see the value on both sides of, sending that nurse to the home. There's a major value in that for some. For some patients, they don't want someone in their home, right? So we have to find out what is the model that will work for them. So it sounds like you're getting kind of the same feedback that I'm seeing, which is let's look at it holistically. What's the experience for the patient? And specifically in this conversation, we're talking about rare patients, right? So we're also talking about families that may have multiple children in the home. They may have siblings with the same disease or condition. So these are other considerations that have to be made in terms of that. And I'd love to see us kind of open up that conversation and drive that discussion between the DCT providers and traditional site model, folks like Scout that are providing those patient services logistically and keeping that cost neutrality. How can we all work together in that early space to make sure that the trial is going to help keep that patient in the trial and moving them to completion. So that's great. Thank you for that feedback. It's really interesting. Was there anything? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's a, there's a feeling of it's all or nothing, that it's, well, it either has to be, decentralized or on site, and that someone's going to lose if we go this way versus that way. And I think,
Yeah.
to your point, having it as one of the tools in the toolbox is a good thing, because there might, we have some clients who do research kind of right before clinical trials, looking at the outcome measures. So, if you were going to have your child come in and, each time they were going to be stuck 13 times, is that, would you bring your child back? No.
Yeah,
So scientists, do you need these or do you not? And they try to
that's
make
right.
those decisions earlier. So similarly, saying, okay, so for this part of the study, we would need you on site. And for this part, we can send a nurse to your home to do these things. And kind of making it a hybrid model, probably is the best way to go, because I don't want to travel across the country to get, if it's not going to be something that is, really important that you have to do, versus if you're going to come take my vitals and all of that stuff, fine, show up at my house. Or,
Yeah.
let me go someplace nearby and do it. And I think that's a much better idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we can have that discussion and all partner, it's back to that goal that we said, which is to contribute to positively impact their health and give more people hope, and give the future generations hope that we're making progress on this. And if we can collaborate early, then we can do that. And I think bringing all of the different players in is so important because, like you said, when we're even looking at visits, are we doing so many assessments at one time? Are we doing so much that potentially the child, we have children that their condition will contribute to behavioral issues, and they may not be able to tolerate being in an environment like even a hospital environment for a long duration, but we maybe have to do those assessments at the hospital. So can we offer that family a respite? Can we say, okay, this is a 2-day visit and we're going to take care of you for that night. We're going to make sure that your child is not overstimulated or, encountering these issues that are then going to make it hard for you to even complete the visit, because we may be able to get the patient and their family to the visit, but what if we can't, get everything done? So those are logistical considerations that we'd love to have an opportunity to talk about and offer, in that conversation. What can we do to offer these families a little bit of respite? And I think groups like yours are really important to then convey that out to the patients. Look, we want to make this experience for you. The clinical research industry wants to make this experience better for you. We're invested in that, and we want to make it better. So I think there's so much opportunity here in the conversation and learning so much about what you guys are doing. I want to kind of wrap up with you telling us, what are the goals right now for Rare Patient Voice? What's on your radar? What are you really wanting to do right now? And what's high on your list right now?
So, we're always trying to connect with, more patients, and through our patient advocacy team and through going to events, bringing more patients in so that they can share their experiences, share their voices, be involved in clinical research. So that's, one, and it's kind of a constant. We're always trying to do that. But the other piece is looking to different client audiences. So, we know market research and clinical trials, and there are other places where patients, the patient's input is needed. Patient, like I mentioned, the kind of looking at the, setting up for a clinical trial, getting patient input there so that, the trial is successful. If you kind of set all those things up first, then, you're better enrollment, better retention. It's just, it's almost a no-brainer. But for us, really, looking at different parts of the whole, drug development process and where patients can be involved, because, they can be involved early on in, what sorts of services, what sorts of things do they need in a particular disease community, all the way through, clinical trials and through, post-clinical, where they're, with looking at the write-ups from, the trial outcomes and making them patient friendly so they're usable for a patient. So it's, there our agenda is really expanding kind of the patient population, as well as how the patients are engaged, and other, potential clients, end clients that, might want to work with the patients.
That's great. Thank you. We appreciate that, you sharing with us what you guys are doing, and what you're how you're pushing the innovation forward. You're bringing patients into the community, into the conversation, giving them an opportunity to advocate for themselves, but with the support of a wonderful group of people like Pam, like you, that have put their time and energy into giving that platform. And it's great what you guys are doing, and we appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, and share your insights and your knowledge, your wisdom and experience over these last years of being in the industry. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. Great to talk to you.